who can. I can take a soul that's sin sick, wash it whiter than snow. But I know a man who can. Some call him Savior, the Redeemer of all men. I call him Jesus, for he's my dearest friend. If you feel no one who loves you and your life is out of hand, well, I know a man who can. I can walk upon the water, calm the dark and raging sea, but I know a man who can. I can cause blind eyes to open or make the lame to walk again, but I know a man who can. Some call him Savior, the Redeemer of all men. I call him Jesus, for he's my dearest friend. If you feel that no one loves you and your life is out of hand, well, I know a man who can. Well, I know a man who can.
Proverbs 10:7 said, "The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot." This morning we discussed two types of people. The just, symbolized or shown to us by the life of Mary and how she broke her alabaster box of spikenard and as anointed, the word I'm looking for, Jesus. And the wicked, symbolized with Jezebel and how the dogs ate her and she wasn't even to be buried and remembered. Jezebel was not to be memorialized, and Mary was to be remembered forever. And throughout our lifetimes, we've known Jezebels and we've known Marys. Those we remember and those we try to forget. And so I had told you this morning that each of us would be telling a memory in memorial to those who have died, of somebody we knew personally, they have to have died, and who have profited us by their presence. And this evening while we were singing, it dawned on me that not everybody could even do that. Not everybody is like us that has been surrounded with godly influence. There are people that would not be able to name one Christian. That had never crossed my mind until this evening. You say, man, you're dense. Well, I stand guilty. But think about that for a minute. Here we are, we're trying to think of all the people we've known and all the instances we've been influenced by, of folks in our past that have gone on to their reward. And there are people, and possibly were people sitting here this morning that wouldn't know one. People, do you realize what kind of a job we've got to do? We were raised, Johnny, I don't know about you, but we were raised in godly homes. Church homes, people that went to church. We have had tremendous blessing. And I guess it's just the realization as I look toward the mission field. And we were up there this week and we met with the board, and they gathered around us and prayed for us. And they warned us and said, it is in South Dakota, but said it's like any other mission field. Said the darkness is real. Said the spiritual darkness, it will be a fight like you've not fought. Said the enemy will come in, and said it'll be in your marriage. It'll be with your children. Said the darkness is real. And we're not talking that far. We're not talking foreign country. We're talking just a few miles from where I love to go pheasant hunting. And they warned us, said, be on guard, be watching. And there's been mission work going on in that area for 70 years, was when that mission group got started in that area. And yet, the darkness is still pervasive. And it's coming here. You know, so long we've been in the Bible Belt. And you go up there, which I've not traveled a lot around this area, but where we lived in Bradleyville, the town, I think, at one point had 94 people in it. And 94 people, there was the Baptist Church and the Church of Christ and the Nazarene Church in a town of 94 people. And you get outside of town just a little while, and there was New Mansion and Hercules, and there was church at Caney, and there was church at Garrison, and there's 1, 2, 3 in Taneyville. I mean, there's just churches on every corner. And so even though people may not go to church, the sheer fact that there's so many churches, there's been an influence of God in that area, and there's been some degree of respect for the people that have lived there of the things of God. There's churches all over this area, but there's a lot of people too. People that play on the swing set in this churchyard that need God. So all of that, those, we need to be thankful for our heritage. Yea, I have a goodly heritage, the psalmist said. And as I've thought today, and I'll go first to give you all a little more time to think who you want to share about. I thought about Remus Rayfelt and one of the conversations I had with him as a kid. Thought about my grandpa Cheatham. Thought about my grandmother Easley. Thought about Ernest Combs. Thought about Goldie Combs. I thought about Rose France and Richard Ferguson, Curly. But the one that comes to mind that probably has helped me in one area as much as any was Wayne Holmes, Heidi's dad. I'm sure I've told some of this before. Wayne had started out in a Christian home. Somewhere along the line, he had lost out and had chosen a homosexual lifestyle. Heidi's parents split after 30 years of marriage, right about 30 years. They split up. Wayne found him a boyfriend. So when Heidi and I married, he was practicing homosexual. He came to our wedding. He did not walk Heidi down the aisle. And as time went on, I had nothing to do with him if I could help it. I think it was in March of 2012. I don't think it was in 11. It was in 11 or 12. Word came from Harmony. Dad was in the altar last night. There's a lot of sins, and I know in God's sight they're about equal, but that sin to me is revolting. And I did not have any use for Wayne. But we were going up there, and I knew I needed to deal with the man. He was going to be around. So my brother-in-law lives in a black and white world like I do, and I called him and I said, "Has Wayne changed?" He said, "Boy, he sure seems different this time." I called Heidi's pastor, Blake Jones, and I didn't call him. I talked to him and I said, I'm going to ask you a straight question. I want a straight answer. I said, has Wayne changed? He said, from every indication, he's made a complete turnaround. Time goes on. Wayne comes to the house. Terry, Heidi's mother, was playing the piano. The girls were singing. Wayne was there. And they were singing, "Where would I be if I had not been for Jesus? What would I be if it had not been for him? I was the toy of the maker of sin. But I'm so glad Christ changed all that could have been. I cried, I've gone too far," they sang. He said, my blood's gone further. I cried, that stain's too deep. He said, my blood's gone deeper. And then he said, I've done too much, but he said, my blood's done more. I'm glad, praise God, for the changing blood. And they kept singing. And Wayne sat on the couch in our living room, and just like I'm doing, he was wiping tears from his eyes. And I learned from a man I did not like, because of the sin of his past, I learned that God's grace is amazing. I saw that it could go deep, deep beyond that perverted, wicked sin and change an individual. And then on the August morning of 2019, we hadn't even started coming here full time. Heidi missed some calls, and he had thrown a clot to his guts, and his whole insides died. And so he was fixing to. We had the assurance that it was okay. He had made the change. And so Wayne influenced me not by anything he said, but by those tears that showed me that God's grace can reach deep, deep, deep and save to the uttermost. And you know, I never told him. I never told him about that. I mentioned it at his funeral, but by then he was gone. I never told him. But he did show me something. You want to go next? I guess, Johnny, do you have somebody that has passed that you knew personally that meant something to you or taught you something?
No, I wasn't raised this way.
I didn't hear what you said. What?
He said he wasn't raised this way.
So even an old pastor, that anybody, not even as a kid, just anyone.
He was close to my mom. He was close to my family.
Go ahead, Dee, then.
Well, the one that stands out to me is my grandma. Because she married somebody that she thought was going to eventually serve the Lord. She got saved when she was about 16, and then she backslid, and the guy that she married raised his hand for prayer, and she thought someday that they would serve the Lord, but he never did. And she had a lot of children and lost most of them. And when they had been married about 20 years or something, right at the beginning of the Depression, Granddad brought her back home to where her family was, and left her with my mom and my uncle that was a baby, and Aunt Edith. He kind of wanted Aunt Edith, I think, to go with him, but Aunt Edith said, no, I'm not leaving her here with these babies, and Aunt Edith was 14. She stayed, and she'd gotten saved. That was one reason why they split up, is because Aunt Edith wouldn't go to the dances with Granddad anymore. And he says, you can have your own religion if you want to, but when you go to pushing it off on my kids, you've gone too far. And the grandma, they had it rough, Mom and Uncle Lloyd and Grandma. And to pick up the kids, she didn't drive, didn't have money to buy a car anyway. she'd walk 2 miles up the road to church and look in the windows. And if there wasn't any women in there, she'd turn around and go back home. She didn't want anybody talking about her not doing the right thing. But if there was one woman in there, well, she'd go in and sit close to the woman. And she served God faithfully. And when she had her 80th birthday celebration, a couple of drunks in town staggered up and knocked on the door and handed her a handkerchief. And thanked her for praying for them and told them that they appreciated her. And they were, one of them had been raised in the church. She went to town one day, and one of these guys said, "Miss Loomer, did you pray for me last night?" She couldn't remember whether she prayed for him or not. So she put him on her prayer list that she, well, along with her family, she said, "I didn't want to be caught without being able to say, yes, I prayed for you." So she prayed for that man along with her family for the rest of her life, so that she wouldn't be able to, so she'd be able to tell him if he ever asked her again that she prayed for him.
Wow, what a heritage. Did she know how you felt about the heritage she was giving you?
Oh, yes. I was real close with my grandma.
Good.
And, yeah, I was about as close as anybody to my grandma. She loved my dad. She didn't approve of what I went through, but she knew what I went through. But when we were together, she didn't talk about it. But she taught me songs and poems and read me stories. And Lila and I, Lila was, well, only one time I was there without anybody else with me. My dad wouldn't let me, and if we said something to her about what was going on at home, she says, "Well, I've got let's not talk about that right now. I've got a song I want to teach you, or I've got a story I want to tell you." Yeah, she was quite a lady.
That's great. Great memories. Joyce, what about you?
Well, I feel like I had very special years in my life. To live in Independence, where the Bible school was, it started a year before I started to school, which was just such a blessing for me. And then I got to grow up in the Bible school, most of the people I knew were godly people. And to be able to have other young people around, it was just such a blessing. And I know that my parents, it was a big deal to be putting us in Bible school, paying all that money for us to go to Bible school. But my mom especially, I was so close to her, and she loved me so much. And she hated for me, she didn't want me to get out the door until she prayed with me in the morning. And there were so many different things in the love that she showed me. And I don't know what to hardly say, but when I got older, I told the people here how she was praying and prayed so seriously for Daddy to get sanctified and for us children to get saved. And I don't see how I could have done some of the things. She thought I was really good, but there was just some things that I did that one time was this was after I got married. I had my hair cut short, and I came home, and I can't imagine how much my mom hurt. I walked in the door and she was on the telephone and she says, "It doesn't look like my Joyce." And I hate that I hurt my mom. But in her, I have cards that I got her that she gave me for my birthday and my last days. And she would praise me that I was taken away in holiness. And I wouldn't want to let my mom down for anything in this world. But I'm so glad that I was trained to love God, sit under gospel messages. And the teachers, almost all the teachers that I had in Bible school were just spatial people. They were just spatial people. I didn't hardly ever see any bad. I had one teacher that was from the outside and she wasn't. But the godly teachers that I had was just, one of the teachers left. She taught me several years in grade school. She left to go to Papua New Guinea as a missionary. She was a spinster lady. And she went to New Guinea, and recently one of the missionaries that used to be in New Guinea put pictures on Facebook of her, and they just meant so much to me to get to see her again. But I feel like I've had a godly influence around me so much in my life, and I want to be a godly influence to those around me, my children and my grandchildren.
Okay. Thank you, Joyce. Max, what about you?
Well, I guess whenever I got in trouble, I always went to my dad. And then after he passed away, my sister and brother had to go to the bank to settle up some things. And what the banker said, there's not a better man that walked the streets of Oswego than Harry DeFault.
Wow. What a heritage.
He was a good man. I knew him when I was a little girl.
Ronna?
Well, I guess within the Memorial Day weekend, my dad was a World War II Navy veteran. And, but that was just side point. But anyway, I'd have to say my dad, when he got saved, I was probably in grade school, but he realized that public school was not right for his children. He left a good paying job, moved to Independence to put his girls in Bible school. I don't know what my life would have been if I hadn't gone to Bible school, because I really liked public school. I was in the dance club. I loved to dance. And he realized I was going the wrong way. So he said, we're going to Bible school. So we quit his job. We moved to Independence when I was in the 6th grade. So I think he was a big influence in my life.
Wow. Roy, what about you?
Oh, probably my parents would be the most influential since I grew up. My mother was kind of a comical person in a way. She had these funny sayings, and they stick with me all my life. One of the things, if she saw somebody sit down without giving thanks, she'd say, well, you didn't even look up to see where your food fell from. Another one that she had, she might send me out to mow the grass, pay me a dime to do it, and then she'd tell me I needed to give the church a penny of it. For $1 or whatever. Then another one, she said that if you worked on Sunday, what you earned from it wouldn't do you any good anyway, you'd lose it.
Wow. Wow, wow. And they must have stuck with you because you're an old goober and still remember. What about you, Brandon?
I think mine is my great-grandma. She was an extremely deep Christian holiness lady. And when I was about 4 or 5, Mom and Dad had only been saved for a few months. And she came to visit us one time, and she stayed in my room, I remember. And I remember one morning I was sitting in the living room with Mom, and I could hear Grandma talking in there, and I asked Mom, I said, who's she talking to? Mom said, well, she's talking to God. And I remember I got up and walked over there, and I tried to look under the door, and I wanted to see God. And that always stuck with me after that as I got older, because it made me realize that God really is with you when you're praying. It may not seem like I thought he could, but he's definitely there. And even to this day, when I get up early in the mornings and have my devotions, I close the door and I know he's there. And I kind of remember that, even though I can't see him, I know that's who I'm talking to. It was a big example.
The psalmist said, a very present help. A very present help. Thank you. Heidi?
I've been trying to think this afternoon who it would have been. My home side, I wasn't very close to those grandparents. And then my mom's side, they're still alive. So I was trying to think of somebody in.
Doesn't have to be family.
I know that, but I guess I haven't had a lot of people real close to me die. And I guess someone that came to mind was Mrs. Green. She just died a couple weeks ago. She would have been principal of one of the schools I went to, and she taught kindergarten for years. And she was also a family. Maybe my grandma's first cousin. Anyway, in all the tributes given to her, she was a big influence in many people's lives. She helped start the school in 1978, and I think she retired in 2015. And anyway, she was had a big influence on lots of kids, and now a lot of those kids are middle-aged. So she would be someone you always had a sweet spirit about her, and corrected when she needed to, but she's one person I thought of.
So Dee's grandma, Joyce's mother, the DeVaults is each of their dad, Roy's mother, Brandon's great-grandmother, your school teacher, mine was an incident from your dad, and Heidi said, quit looking at the clock and quit talking so fast. She said, it makes my head hurt. You speak so fast, so I'll try to slow down. But Remus Rayfelt, one more story. Dr. Rayfelt, somewhere we had moved to Missouri in '89, and it would have been summertime camp meeting. We were going to the ICHA camp, would have been seems like those years it was Plainfield, so it may have been 90 or 91. And I was riding. Mrs. Rayfelt loved to drive and drive fast. And when they finally got her keys away from her when she was in her mid to late 90s, we were all glad. But in those days, she would have been late 80s, drove a Mercury Grand Marquis, one of those big cars. And Dr. Rayfelt was nearing the end of his race and had a lot of health problems. And I was riding with them. Miss Rayfelt was driving, and I was sitting in the front seat, and Dr. Rayfelt was in the back, I guess where he could stretch out more and try to be comfortable, and that was a big car. And I remember him talking, and he got to talking from Malachi, about bring your tithes and your gift to the storehouse. And he was talking to me about what is the storehouse. Here I was, 10, 11, I doubt I was 12. And he was talking to me, not childlike, not talking down, not demeaning, talking to me like I was an individual, somebody. This great man of God that had been Secretary of World Missions for the Nazarene Church, traveled the world, denominational leadership, treating a kid like an individual. And that always stuck, that he wasn't demeaning, he wasn't derogatory, he did not make me feel stupid. I felt like an individual. He's long since gone to his reward. as we're being influences with people, our families, random kids, people we meet. That's always stuck. Let's not be demeaning. None of these you said you told. I don't know how many of them we told. In 2 Peter chapter 3, down toward the end of the chapter, verse 15, Peter's talking, and he says, "An account that the long-suffering of our Lord is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable rest." Peter seems to, as he's writing, give accolades, a shout out, a little bit of a praise to his comrade in arms, the Apostle Paul. I suspect at this time that Paul was still living, and Paul might have known what Peter had to say, that he was a brother and he was beloved and he had wisdom that he'd been given, and some of his things were deep that he had written. He told. And so I would challenge us, for the ones that are still alive that mean something to us, tell them. Tell them. Don't just cast roses on their grave. Tell them now. I need to be better at it, to give words of affirmation, encouragement, compliments, and tell people, you mean something. You've influenced me. You've laid some bricks in my pathway for me to walk upon that'll keep me out of the mud and the muck. So we want to tell them. The memory of the just is blessed. Thank you all for participating. We've had a good service this evening. The Lord's presence has been here in prayer and in song and in our memories of people he's allowed to influence us. Anything else before we stand and dismiss?